In 2078, the NEB Corporation has been controlling all mining operations in the known solar systems for 50 years. 20 years ago, on Sirius 6B, NEB found a new material named beryllium, which could solve the world's energy crisis. However, mining beryllium unleashed lethal doses of radiation and pollution. The Federation of Miners and Scientists, known as the Alliance, asked to stop the mining operations. But NEB answered with war. This also inspired a Cold War on Earth. But actual combat has only happened on Sirius 6B. Eventually, NEB started to use nuclear bombs, which killed most of the population and ravaged the planet. A great number of miners were also killed by clouds of beryllium radiation. Now, in the 10th year of war, only a small crew remains in a bunker. Some miners are gambling for cigarettes. At that moment, they see something moving on the security cameras. So, they take a closer look with binoculars and discover that a NEB soldier is approaching. When he's finally close enough, they don't fire because they notice that something isn't right. Suddenly, a loud screech can be heard as something begins to move very quickly under the sand. The soldier immediately shoots the thing to stop it. But more of these creatures arrive. They're called screamers, and their screeching makes the soldier's ears hurt. He continuously shoots at them, yet the screamers keep coming and surround him. When the soldier pulls out a cylinder, the screamers jump out of the sand to cut his arm off. After also cutting his leg, they attack one last time to kill him. The miners watching this cry or puke at the sight. At that moment, Chuck arrives and says that without the screamers, they would have already lost the war. He wonders why a soldier would approach their bunker alone. And a miner theorizes he wanted them to see that cylinder. Chuck decides to retrieve it. So he activates a bracelet that will keep the screamers away before stepping outside. The soldier's leg suddenly disappears under the sand as it's dragged by the screamers, and soon the rest of the body follows. When the screamers try to take the chopped arm too, Chuck opens fire to scare them off. Then he grabs the cylinder and discovers it's a message for the Alliance. Moments later, Chuck brings the message to Commander Joseph, pointing out how strange it was to see a NEB soldier alone after 6 months of nothing. Joseph can't open the cylinder, which ends up popping on its own to eject the message. It was sent by the Marshal of the NEB Army and asks for peace negotiations. Chuck thinks it's good news, but Joseph thinks it's a trap. Afterward, Joseph tells his communications officer to send a message to Earth asking how they should proceed. She takes the chance to inform him that they've picked up a message on the emergency bandwidth from a commercial transport, requesting permission to land. The bunker is far from shipping lanes, so Joseph thinks it's strange for a commercial transport to fly in the area. He tells the officer to ask the transport what the emergency is. Then, Chuck and Joseph notice that the message includes a map of NEB's command post. Joseph still thinks it's strange that they send just one guy and not a full team. Not to mention that the monitors indicate NEB hasn't had radio waves for 2 weeks. Sometime later, Secretary Green arrives to talk to Joseph and Chuck. He informs them that NEB has asked for ceasefire so they can finally end the war. Beryllium has been found on Triton 4, and it doesn't have radiation, so NEB can start mining there soon. At that moment, Green starts dissolving because he's actually a hologram message. The radiation from a dust storm is interfering with it, but after pressing a few buttons it goes back to normal. A chunk of the message was lost, so the duo only hears Green asking them to make no contact with the NEB base to avoid jeopardizing their chance. After the message ends, the duo goes to the bar and discusses the real chances of peace. Chuck wonders if Joseph will look for his ex-wife after this is over, but Joseph thinks she's probably moved on. At that moment, the crew is warned that the dust storm is coming closer, so they all light up a special red cigarette that protects them from radiation. Suddenly, the building starts shaking and the lights go out as the furniture falls. The crew rushes outside and discovers that the commercial transport is crashed nearby. Some men work on putting out the fire, while others enter the aircraft to look for survivors. They notice that the passengers aren't civilians, which means this isn't a commercial ship. All the people on the seats are dead, but they manage to find one survivor under the debris outside the aircraft. They find the words, Sirius 6B, transportation, which doesn't make sense because this planet has no transportation service. Then they check the cargo and are shocked to discover dozens of boxes full of weapons, including a nuclear reactor. The team manages to rescue a survivor named Ace and wants to take him to the bunker quickly because he doesn't have a bracelet. However, Ace runs back to the aircraft to retrieve something. The screamers immediately come after him, so the crew opens fire to try to keep them at bay. Unfortunately, a screamer reaches the plane and cuts a hole to steal one of the bodies. After finding his Discman, Ace tries to run away but is blocked by a jumping screamer. Luckily, Joseph shoots the screamer before it can hurt Ace. Later in the bunker, Joseph studies the pieces of the screamer he shot down. This model has a new improved chip. Ace comes to see him and reveals he's a gunnery specialist. He's curious about the screamers. So, Joseph explains they were developed by the Alliance on Earth to neutralize the war here. When Ace tries to touch it, he has to remove his hand quickly to avoid losing fingers. Joseph is a little worried, because the data in the screamer indicates it's modified itself. When Chuck joins them, he tells Ace about the nuclear reactor and that the aircraft pretended to be a civilian ship. Ace didn't know any of that, but he does explain that all the passengers were on their way to Triton 4 to keep fighting NEB. Confused, Joseph mentions Green's message. So Ace informs him that Green died 2 years ago. Joseph angrily kicks Ace out of his office before discussing the situation with Chuck, who doesn't believe Ace. He thinks that if the Alliance truly had abandoned them, they wouldn't keep sending them provisions. Joseph yells at him, asking him to accept the truth they've been betrayed and left here to die. The Marshal probably knows this and that's why he sent the map. Joseph decides to attend the meeting, and Chuck wants to go with him. But Joseph makes him the bunker leader in his absence and will take Ace instead. Afterward, Chuck gives Ace his own bracelet. He explains that the Screamers only attack living things because they can read pulse rates. The bracelet sends a transmission that makes it sound like their hearts are flatlining. Although sometimes radioactivity corrodes the bracelet's terminals. Once Ace and Joseph are armed, they leave the bunker. Ace plays some music on his Discman for the duration of the trip, which has them walking through snowy areas. When Ace notices the air is terrible, Joseph explains that radiation makes it that way and gives him a red cigarette. They watch the abandoned mines from afar, and Joseph points out that it used to be the most profitable business in the galaxy. Sometime later, they reach the ruins of the city, which was bombed by NEB. Thousands of civilians died. Although the attack was supposed to be directed at the Alliance, Joseph shares that he came to this planet 20 years ago as a miner. And back then, the crew worked for NEB. Eventually, the crew refused to keep mining. And after a standoff of 4 years, NEB bombarded the area. The crew has been hiding in the bunker since then. The story is interrupted by loud screeching. Ace turns around and watches a screamer dragging a dead rat under the snow. He quickly opens fire and the screamer runs away while Joseph tells him to stop. Ace wonders why the screamers want the bodies. So Joseph explains that rotting meat gives off methane gas, which the screamers use as fuel. The production of screamers happens underground, and the process has been automated so they make themselves. Nobody knows how, which creeps Ace out. After walking for a while, the duo hears a noise and immediately drops to the ground to hide. They get their guns ready, only to discover a child with a teddy bear. Joseph approaches him and learns the boy's named David. He lives in the city ruins, alone, and says he survives eating food, but he doesn't say what kind. He also claims he survived the screamers by hiding and asks the men to take him with them. Joseph refuses, but he gives him some food and promises to pick him up in 2 days when he returns home. However, Ace insists they can't abandon him and David keeps begging. So Joseph agrees to bring him with them. When night falls, the group rests inside an old building and starts a fire. Joseph calls the bunker and learns that they had a new arrival. The connection is weak, so the call doesn't last long. Then Joseph picks up a rock and is startled when it suddenly grows limbs and a head. David laughs while pushing the harmless bug off. Later, Ace tries to relax. So he takes off his bracelet and connects his Discman to special glasses. A screamer soon enters the room, and Joseph has to push Ace out of the way to save him from its attack. Then he opens fire to quickly destroy the screamer. Joseph wonders why. Ace didn't hear it and checks the strange glasses only to discover that Ace has been watching naughty movies. A furious Joseph immediately destroys the glasses and scolds Ace as he makes him put his bracelet back on. When Joseph checks the screamer, he notices it's shaped like an animal and has an upgraded chip. The next day, the trip continues, and since Ace doesn't have music anymore, he talks non-stop. Eventually, they reach an old refinery, and Joseph tries to scan the area for enemies. Suddenly, David is shot down by hiding soldiers. When the guys check his wound, they're horrified to see mechanical parts. It turns out David is a screamer with a different kind of chip, which Joseph pulls out. At that moment, David begins screeching. Ace points his gun at him, and David grabs it to make him miss the shot, which causes him to lose an arm. NEB's snipers Becker and Ross approach the group and explain that the screamers have gotten smarter. They pretend to be children so the humans will take them into the bunkers where they can kill everyone. When the soldiers accuse him of bringing David on purpose, Joseph swears he didn't know and tells them he came for the peace negotiations. As he hands them the message, Becker agrees to take Joseph and Ace to their bunker, ignoring Ross's complaints. By using the vent system, they get inside the building. Joseph calls his own bunker to try to tell them about the new kind of screamer, but there's too much interference. Once the group settles down, they talk about David and an argument ensues. So they point their guns at each other. They're interrupted by Jessica, who asks them to behave and share some whiskey. Joseph talks to her in private and learns that there hasn't been a commissary in the building for over 2 years, since the screamers started to attack. When he asks about the Marshal, Jessica tells him he must be in a command bunker with the communication satellite. She also explains that there are entire hordes of Davids who killed most of the soldiers here. Jessica agrees to take Joseph to the command bunker, but in return she wants to go back to Earth. Joseph explains that Earth has abandoned them and he can only take her to his bunker, which she accepts. Afterward, Joseph reunites with Ace, who has been looking around and has found several dangerous weapons including plutonium. However, Joseph reminds him that the Alliance doesn't use nukes. The group then gets on an elevator that takes them to the maintenance tunnels. Ross is suddenly startled by a noise, but it's just a bunch of rats, and Becker teases him for being scared of them. After walking for a while, they find a grate in the ceiling and open it, causing a body to fall off. They use the grate to reach the next floor, where they climb a ladder that finally takes them to the command center. When they look around, they are horrified to discover blood everywhere but not a single person. Ross has a breakdown because he thinks there's no hope and starts throwing things off the tables. Joseph fires in the air to stop him and tells Ace to shoot him if he makes another noise. Next, Joseph tries to use the computer to contact Earth, but he keeps getting an error message. At that moment, a screamer enters the room, so the group hides behind the servers. The screamer climbs the computer and connects its tail to download some information. Then it leaves. When the group comes out, the screamer detects Ross and starts coming back. Ace covers Ross with his own body so the bracelet can protect both of them, causing the screamer to fail its scan and leave again. However, as soon as Ace takes one step back, the screamer jumps to attack. The men immediately open fire to kill it. But they also break the computer in the process. As the lights go out, they hear David's voice asking if he can come with them. Joseph makes Ace evacuate the others while he stays with the computer. He manages to turn it on again and scans the chips, which gives him access to the screamer's files. Two Davids are walking in the darkness, and Joseph can hear them talk again while he studies the different screamer models. When David gets close enough, his face transforms into a horrible monster. So Joseph shoots him and runs away. At the elevator, Ace wants to wait for Joseph, but Ross refuses. In the tunnel, Joseph keeps tripping and falling while hearing David's voice getting closer. He's suddenly startled by a rat on his shoulder and someone appearing behind him. But it's just Ace. The screeching follows them through the tunnel while the duo keeps running, and they make sure to close the door before approaching the elevator. The others have already left and the elevator is coming back down very slowly. While the screamers start shaking the door, the elevator finally arrives with Jessica, so Joseph and Ace get to escape. The group reunites on the next floor and Joseph shares what he saw on the computer, and David is type 3 and the reptile is a type 1, so they're missing one type of screamer. Jessica and the boys explain that type 2 is a wounded soldier crying for help. There were a few a month ago, but they haven't seen them since. Becca remembers that type 2 doesn't have many lines of dialogue and accuses Ross of being one. When a desperate Ross is about to open fire, Becker throws a knife at his chest to test it. Ace agrees with his theory because he remembers Ross didn't drink whiskey with them. However, when Joseph pulls the knife out, he finds blood, so Becker kills an innocent man. Now Jessica thinks Becker may be a screamer too and realizes she didn't know he existed until 2 days ago. Becker dares her to shoot, but Jessica can't when the group leaves the building. Joseph tries to call the bunker to no avail. Becker refuses to apologize because it was an accident, and Joseph says he'll kill him if necessary. After many hours of walking, and they arrive at the Alliance bunker, and Joseph finally manages to communicate with Chuck. He asks him to come out, but Chuck just keeps repeating that he should come in instead. A suspicious Joseph asks for the door to be opened, and the group is horrified to see a bunch of Davids coming out of the bunker with their teddy bears. The team immediately opens fire, bringing down the kids one by one. Soon the underground screamers also appear, so the group has to split their attention to shoot those as well. When the Davids get too close, the team activates their flamethrowers to melt them down. Unfortunately, more and more Davids keep coming out of the bunker. Joseph reveals that Ace stole a nuke from the command center and tells him to put it in his weapon. Then he shoots it at the bunker, causing a huge explosion that blows up the building and knocks the whole group out. In the morning, Ace wakes up and hears Becker asking for help because he's hurt, so he rushes to his side. However, Becker confirms he's a screamer and hugs Ace to start crushing him. By the time Joseph wakes up, Ace is already dead. Becker throws the body away before knocking Joseph down. Then Joseph shoots him in the face and damages his cheek, but isn't enough to stop him. While Becker keeps talking about clanker philosophy, Joseph gets stronger ammo and shoots him again, this time splitting his body into two. Afterward, Joseph tells Jessica that there's an emergency vehicle, programmed by the Alliance, which they can use to go to Earth, although it's hidden in the mountains. Before leaving, Joseph takes Becker's chip and notices it has words in a language he doesn't recognize. When Jessica asks to see it, Joseph takes the chance to slash her hand. The wound bleeds, confirming she's human. Joseph bandages the injury while apologizing, saying he had to make sure she wasn't a screamer. He offers to put himself through the same test, but Jessica stops him and they kiss. Then the couple starts searching for the emergency ship. The cold is quite vicious and Jessica considers giving up. However, Joseph says she's all he has and promises to take her home. Sometime later, Joseph finds a panel under the snow and presses a button to open a hidden door in the mountains that takes them to a secret warehouse, while Jessica takes the elevator in the vehicle pit. Joseph tries to activate the system, but the buttons aren't working. He climbs the stairs and opens a power box to fix some cables that trigger a countdown. At that moment, someone punches Joseph. He looks up to find Chuck, who throws his gun away and says everyone must die alone before pushing him off the edge. Joseph manages to save himself by holding onto a crane, so Chuck jumps to join him. It turns out Chuck is a screamer and explains that Type 2 South can take people's faces. That's how they got Chuck and also the marshal who sent a fake message. Chuck tries to throw Joseph off the crane, but Joseph holds onto it again. Then Chuck puts his legs around Joseph's neck, choking him while mocking him for losing his wife. Joseph suddenly pulls out a knife and stabs Chuck, but it doesn't do much damage. Next, he connects a cable to the knife, which electrocutes Chuck and causes him to fall. When his body hits a security laser in the pit, it disintegrates. Afterward, Joseph goes down the pit using the crane and reunites with Jessica. Unfortunately, they discover that the aircraft only has room for one person, so Joseph kisses Jessica and tells her to go. She says she can't before a second Jessica appears behind them. It turns out she's a Type 4, which is so advanced that it can bleed and even get naughty. A furious Joseph pushes the first Jessica off and tries to get on the ship, only for the second Jessica to throw him against the crane. Then she tries to get on the ship too, But Jessica 1 comes back and starts fighting her for it. The screamers fight each other all over the place and keep getting wounded when they touch the security lasers, while Joseph sneaks around to grab a gun. Jessica 2 manages to stab the other one to defeat her. Then Joseph shoots the winner, who screeches to make Joseph fall. At that moment, the aircraft activates and the fire from the engines burns Jessica 2 until she explodes. Jessica 1 says that Joseph taught her how to love before she dies. After kissing her goodbye, Joseph rushes to get on the aircraft and finally takes off, with a teddy bear as his only souvenir from this planet. When he takes off his bracelet, the bear starts moving because it's a screamer too. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.